In a world where likes are currency and vulnerability goes viral, empathy has become a weapon. And the people who know how to use it, they don't want your understanding, they want your obedience. This is weaponized empathy. Let's begin. Chapter 1. What is weaponized empathy? Empathy is what makes us human. It's our ability to care about people we've never met, to feel someone else's pain even when we've never lived it ourselves. But empathy isn't always pure. And when it's used with the wrong intent, it stops being a virtue and becomes a tool. A tool to influence, a tool to distract, a tool to control. Weaponized empathy is when someone uses emotional appeal not to connect with you, but to disarm you, to lower your guard, to make you stop asking questions. It can look like anything: a viral post from a crying creator, a political campaign built on tear-filled speeches, a coworker who always plays the victim. It feels real, but it's often not. And the reason it works is because our brains are wired to respond emotionally before logically. It's a survival trait. When we see someone cry, we react. When we hear a sad story, we want to help. That response bypasses the part of your brain that normally evaluates risk or motive. It skips analysis and jumps straight to trust. This is why it's such a powerful form of manipulation. It doesn't look like manipulation. It looks like kindness, like compassion, like decency. But behind the emotion can be something far more strategic, a way to build a brand, to avoid accountability, to silence criticism. It happens in politics all the time. A leader stands in front of victims and tells you they care, while voting against the solution. It happens on social media, where pain becomes content. The formula is simple. Step 1, share a struggle. Step 2, build trust through vulnerability. Step 3, deliver the ask: money, loyalty, silence, or attention. And because we're human, it works, even when we know better. Think about it. Would you rather challenge someone's facts or comfort their pain? Most of us choose the latter, because it feels good. And the people who weaponize empathy count on that. They create a world where being skeptical makes you look cold-hearted, where being logical makes you look cruel. But here's the truth. Empathy without awareness is easy to exploit. That doesn't mean we should stop caring. It means we need to ask better questions. Is this person asking for support or using sympathy as a shield? Is this real emotion or just emotional content? Who benefits when I feel this way? Weaponized empathy isn't always obvious. It's subtle. Sometimes it's staged. Sometimes it's unconscious. But in every case, the pattern is the same. Emotional appeal that bypasses reason and makes you act before you think. So the next time something tugs at your heartstrings, pause. Not to reject the feeling, but to ask, what's being asked of me in return? Because empathy is powerful, and like all power, it can heal or it can control. That's the difference between compassion and compliance. Chapter 2. The psychology behind empathy triggers. Empathy feels like a choice, but most of the time, it's not. You don't decide to tear up when you see someone cry. You don't choose to flinch when a stranger's voice cracks mid-sentence. It happens before the decision, before logic. That's because empathy isn't just a moral value, it's a neurological reflex. Inside your brain are mirror neurons, specialized cells that fire both when you do something and when you see someone else do it. It's like your brain is rehearsing their experience in real time. That's why watching someone wince in pain makes you wince too. It's why emotional content hits harder than logical arguments. Your brain isn't just observing, it's participating. Now here's where it gets dangerous. If someone learns how to trigger your mirror neurons, they can bypass your defenses. They don't have to convince you, they just have to make you feel. This is what makes empathy so powerful and so easy to weaponize. The part of the brain that responds to emotion is called the amygdala. It lights up like a flare when we see distress, fear, sadness, or suffering. And the amygdala is fast. It's faster than your rational brain. That's by design. Evolution favors immediate emotional response because it used to save our lives. But in modern life, that speed can be hijacked. When you watch an emotional video online, when you read a tragic post, when someone shows you their vulnerable side, your emotional brain kicks in before your logic catches up. You feel, then you believe, then you act. This process has a name: emotional reasoning. It's when we start to believe that what we feel must be what's real. I feel bad for them, so they must be telling the truth. They're emotional, so it would be cruel to question them. And just like that, Empathy becomes a shortcut, not to truth, but to trust. This is where emotional manipulation thrives, because some people, knowingly or not, learn to activate that shortcut on demand. An influencer who breaks down in every thumbnail, a coworker who always cries after messing up, a leader who wraps harmful policies in personal stories of loss. They don't argue, they perform, because performance is more effective than logic, especially in an algorithmic world where emotional content is rewarded with attention, reach, and currency. And it's not just individuals, it's the systems around us. News outlets don't lead with statistics, they lead with a single crying face. Social media doesn't reward nuance, it rewards drama. Even brands now open their ads with stories of hardship before cutting to product pitches. This is tied to something psychologists call the identifiable victim effect. Basically, we care more about one emotional face than we do about thousands of abstract victims. You can tell someone that 20,000 people are starving and they'll scroll past it, but show a photo of one starving child with a trembling voiceover, donations pour in. Our brains aren't wired for scale. They're wired for stories. And this creates a strange paradox. The more emotional content we see, the more emotionally numb we become. It's called compassion fatigue. After the fifth tragedy you scroll past today, your brain starts tuning it out. Your heart doesn't break, it shrugs. And while we become emotionally desensitized, manipulators get sharper. They learn to cry more convincingly, to frame stories just right, to calibrate their vulnerability for maximum return. And now your empathy becomes a trigger, a switch, a vulnerability. So what can you do? First, pause. Always pause. The moment you feel a strong emotional pull, stop and examine it. Ask, who is telling me this story? What do they want from me? Would this still feel compelling without music, lighting, or framing? Second, separate feeling from action. You can care deeply and still ask hard questions. You can empathize and remain critical. Emotional manipulation works best when we believe we have to choose. Trust or question, care or analyze, believe or doubt. But we don't. In fact, the most powerful empathy is the kind that includes awareness. The kind that sees the tears and still asks what's missing from this picture. Because empathy without awareness isn't virtue, it's a vulnerability. And in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon. Chapter 3: How Influencers Use Empathy to Monetize Pain. Empathy connects us. It builds bridges between people who've never met. And when used with care, it can build communities, movements, and real change. But in the age of algorithms, empathy has become something else entirely. It's become a product. And nowhere is that more visible than in the world of influencers. Let's be clear, not all vulnerability is fake. Not every personal story is manipulation. Some creators genuinely share to connect, heal, or help others feel less alone. But when emotion becomes content, when pain is packaged for clicks, likes, and sponsorships, we step into dangerous territory. Because in a world where attention is currency, sadness becomes a strategy. Platforms reward engagement. Engagement rewards emotion. And that emotional content doesn't have to be genuine, just effective. Emotional storytelling performs well. A raw confession, a quiet pause, a downcast gaze into the lens. These moments create a sense of authenticity. But often, that authenticity is edited, tested, and rehearsed. What might look like a vulnerable outpouring is sometimes a content schedule. Monday, anxiety video. Wednesday, healing update. Friday, brand collab with self-care merch. Influencers learn which angles get attention. They learn which lighting makes sadness look cinematic. They learn to speak in a way that feels spontaneous but follows a formula. Because when vulnerability gets rewarded with attention, followers, and money, it stops being a risk and becomes a strategy. This creates a feedback loop. The more emotion shared, the more attention gained. The more attention gained, the more incentive to stay emotional. Eventually, some creators aren't just sharing their pain, they're shaping it to fit the platform. They're repackaging difficult moments in ways that keep audiences engaged and brands interested. And for viewers, this creates confusion. We're not just watching someone be vulnerable, we're watching someone monetize it. There's often a link below the post. Support me. Buy the shirt. Subscribe for more. The line between empathy and influence blurs, and what feels like connection might just be conversion. Worse, this style of content can set a cultural standard where only highly emotional pain is seen as worthy. Subtle struggle gets ignored. Quiet healing doesn't trend. Calm reflection doesn't go viral. And this doesn't just affect viewers, it affects creators too. When your audience expects you to be vulnerable all the time, you begin performing your pain. You shape your identity around sadness, because that's what the algorithm rewards. This can lead to burnout, blurred boundaries, and emotional dependence on online validation. It can also drown out real support systems in favor of comment sections and view counts. And for brands, it's a goldmine. When someone's emotional story builds trust, that trust can be redirected toward product, soft lighting, sad music, a moment of connection. Then, use my code for 20% off. Empathy becomes a funnel. The story makes you feel. The feeling builds trust. The trust becomes a sale. This doesn't mean influencers are evil. It means the system rewards those who package emotion efficiently. And when systems reward emotional performance, emotional manipulation becomes normalized. The more we consume this kind of content, the harder it becomes to tell the difference between shared pain and manufactured pain. We confuse marketing for meaning and sincerity for strategy. Because empathy is valuable, your attention is valuable, and in a system built on visibility, your reaction is the product. Influencers didn't invent this, they're just playing the game. But the more aware we become, the less likely we are to be played. Empathy shouldn't come with a checkout link. Pain shouldn't be a marketing tool. An influence built on emotional currency should be questioned, not blindly followed. Because you deserve more than connection that's been curated. And your compassion deserves better than manipulation, masked as intimacy. Chapter 4. How to protect your empathy in a manipulative world. Empathy is one of the most powerful things you have. It's not weakness. It's not softness. It's not something to outgrow. It's your ability to feel someone else's pain and still keep your identity intact. But that power is only as strong as your ability to guard it. Because in today's world, empathy is currency. It gets harvested by algorithms. It gets redirected by influencers. It gets weaponized by people who understand what moves you faster than you understand yourself. And that's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. You can be kind. You can be thoughtful. You can care deeply and still get used. Empathy doesn't protect you from manipulation. In fact, it makes you more vulnerable to it. People don't need to control your logic anymore. They just need to hijack your heart. And when that happens, your empathy stops being connection and starts being compliance. So how do you protect yourself? First, recognize the difference between feeling and truth. Just because something moves you doesn't mean it's trustworthy. Just because someone opens up doesn't mean they're being honest. And just because something sounds vulnerable doesn't mean it's safe. Second, watch for patterns. Manipulation isn't always obvious, but it's almost always repetitive. Someone who constantly positions themselves as a victim. Someone who always breaks down right before asking for something. Someone who never allows space for you to think, only to feel. That's not connection, that's control. Third, pay attention to the production. Real vulnerability is quiet. It's awkward, it's sometimes ugly. It usually happens when no one's watching. What gets rewarded online is vulnerability as performance. Soft lighting, a piano soundtrack, a perfect pause before the voice breaks. That's not intimacy, that's editing. Fourth, reclaim your pause. You don't owe anyone your immediate emotion, not your trust, not your sympathy, not your reaction. If someone's story makes you feel something, pause. Ask yourself, is this feeling mine or was it planted? That single moment of reflection could save you from being pulled into someone else's narrative without consent. Fifth, set hard boundaries. Empathy without boundaries is a magnet for users. If you always give people the benefit of the doubt, you'll attract people who build their entire identity around doubt. Let go of the guilt. You're allowed to question someone's motives and still hope the best for them. You're allowed to say, I care about you, but I won't be manipulated by you. That's not cold. That's self-respect. Sixth, don't mistake emotional intensity for truth. People can be sincere and misleading. People can believe what they say and still use you. The most effective manipulation happens when the person doing it doesn't even realize they're doing it. It's not always malice. Sometimes it's just survival. But that doesn't mean you have to participate. Seventh, empathy isn't always a yes. You can feel for someone and still walk away. You can understand someone and still protect yourself. You can love someone and still leave. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. Empathy with no awareness is how people burn out. It's how good people get bitter. It's how compassion gets turned into compliance, and then into silence. Because when you're always understanding everyone else, you eventually forget how to stand up for yourself. That's why protecting your empathy isn't selfish. It's survival. It's clarity. It's how you stay open without becoming exposed. So here's what real grounded empathy looks like. It feels what others feel, but doesn't collapse under it. It listens, but doesn't absorb. It offers care, but doesn't carry what isn't yours. It chooses when to give and when to step away. Empathy doesn't mean you have to soften every edge. Sometimes, it means being the one person who says, "I won't play this game with you." That's still compassion. That's still connection. That's how you stop your empathy from being turned against you. Because here's the final truth. You are responsible for what your empathy funds. With your time, your attention, your energy, you are either feeding performance or supporting honesty. You don't need to stop feeling. You just need to stop apologizing for thinking too.